The wind screamed across the empty plains like a wounded animal searching for shelter. Snow fell in thick waves, swallowing the road, the fences, and every sign of life in the wild Wyoming valley. By nightfall, the storm had turned into a merciless, white wall, the kind of blizzard that old ranchers warned about in quiet voices, the kind that could bury a man, a horse, or an entire town. Emily Carter gripped the steering wheel of her small car as the headlights fought helplessly against the swirling snow. She had only arrived in this forgotten corner of the West 2 days ago, hired as the new teacher for the tiny schoolhouse in the valley. Back in the city, she had imagined wide-open skies, peaceful mornings, and friendly neighbors. No one had told her about storms like this. The road had vanished an hour ago. Her tires slid again, the car jerking sideways as wind slammed into it like a giant invisible hand. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She could barely see 5 feet ahead. Snow piled against the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Then the engine sputtered. For one terrible second, she thought she imagined it. But the next moment, the car coughed again and lost power. No, please not now. She pressed the gas pedal, but the engine groaned and died. The car rolled slowly to a stop, half buried already by the raging storm. Silence filled the vehicle except for the furious roar of wind outside. Emily stared through the frosted glass, panic creeping into her chest like ice. Her phone showed no signal. The temperature had already dropped far below freezing. She was alone in the middle of nowhere, and the storm was only getting worse. Minutes passed. The cold slowly pushed its way into the car. Her breath formed pale, clouds in the air. Emily wrapped her coat tighter around herself, but it barely helped. Her thoughts raced. If she stayed in the car, the cold might kill her before morning. If she stepped outside, the storm could swallow her within minutes. Tears welled in her eyes as fear tightened around her heart. Then, through the chaos of snow and darkness, something moved. At first it looked like a shadow. A massive shape emerging slowly from the storm. Emily froze. The figure grew clearer as it stepped closer to the car. A man, but not just any man. He was enormous. Broad shoulders wrapped in a heavy coat, a dark hat pulled low against the storm. Snow clung to his beard and the edges of his coat as if he had been walking through the blizzard for miles. He knocked once on the window. Emily hesitated. Her instincts screamed at her not to open the door. She was alone with a stranger in the middle of nowhere, but the cold was getting worse. Slowly she cracked the window an inch. The wind howled inside immediately. "You will freeze if you stay here much longer." His voice was deep, calm, almost impossible to hear through the storm. Emily stared at him carefully. "Who are you?" "Name is Daniel Hayes." The name meant nothing to her. "I live about half a mile from here. Ranch cabin." He glanced at the dying car. "This storm is getting worse. If you trust me, I can get you somewhere warm." Emily's heart pounded. Every warning she had ever heard about strangers echoed in her mind. But another wave of icy wind shook the car violently. She was running out of time. Daniel studied her face quietly. "I will not force you," he said. "But you do not have much time left out here." The truth in his voice was impossible to ignore. Emily swallowed hard. Then she opened the door. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet. Daniel caught her arm instantly, steady as a mountain. "Stay close. To me." He pulled a thick wool blanket from his shoulder and wrapped it around her before leading her into the blizzard. Emily struggled to walk as snow pushed against them like a living force. But the giant cowboy moved through the storm with surprising confidence. Step by step, they fought across the frozen land. At times, Emily thought she might collapse. The cold clawed at her bones and the wind stole the air from her lungs. But Daniel never let go of her arm. Finally, through the swirling snow, a faint orange glow appeared ahead. A cabin, small, old, but standing strong against the storm. Daniel pushed open the heavy wooden door and guided her inside. Warmth wrapped around her instantly. Fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Lanterns cast soft, golden light across the wooden walls. Emily collapsed into a chair, shaking from cold and exhaustion. Daniel quietly closed the door and secured it against the wind. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Emily slowly began to feel her fingers again. The cowboy placed a kettle over the fire and poured her a steaming cup of coffee. "Drink." She took the cup with trembling hands. "Thank you." He nodded once and leaned against the wall, silent. Emily studied him more carefully. Now, up close, he looked even bigger. His hands were rough from years of hard work. His face carried the quiet weight of someone who had lived through more than most people could imagine. Yet there was something else in his eyes. Sadness. As the storm raged outside, Emily finally asked the question sitting in her mind. Why were you out in this storm? Daniel stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "Looking for you." Emily blinked. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Your car passed the old fence road earlier today. I saw the tracks when the storm started, so you came looking for me." He nodded slowly. "Out here, people help each other survive." Emily felt something shift inside her chest, but before she could respond, a loud crash echoed outside. Both of them looked toward the door. The wind roared even louder now. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Storm just got worse. Emily felt fear rise again. "Do you think the cabin is safe?" He looked around calmly. "It has survived worse." The fire crackled as night closed in. Around the small cabin, outside, the blizzard grew more violent, turning the world into a frozen prison. Inside, two strangers sat across from each other. Neither of them realized yet that before the storm ended, both of their lives would change forever, and that the quiet, giant cowboy who had saved her from the cold was hiding a past that could shake the entire valley. To be continued in Part 2, where the truth about Daniel Hayes will be revealed, and the storm will force both of them to face a danger neither of them expected. The storm did not calm as the night grew deeper. Instead, the wind screamed louder, slamming against the cabin, walls like an angry beast trying to break inside. Snow piled higher and higher against the windows until the outside world slowly disappeared behind a white frozen wall. Inside the small ranch cabin, the fire burned steady, throwing warm light across the wooden floor. Emily sat wrapped in the thick blanket Daniel had given her. The warmth had returned to her hands and feet, but her mind was still racing. Only a few hours earlier, she had believed she might die alone in a frozen car. Now she was sitting in a quiet cabin with a giant cowboy she had met in the middle of a blizzard. Daniel Hayes moved calmly around the room, placing another log onto the fire. The flames jumped higher, lighting the lines of his weathered face. Emily watched him for a moment before speaking. "You saved my life tonight." Daniel shrugged slightly as if it was nothing. Anyone out here would have done the same. Emily was not so sure about that. The storm outside was terrifying. Most people would never risk walking through it for a stranger. But he had. The wind howled again, shaking the cabin walls. Emily glanced nervously toward the window. "Do storms like this happen often here?" Daniel sat down slowly in a wooden chair across from her, every winter, and sometimes worse. Emily tried to imagine living in a place where storms could trap you like this without warning. The city she came from felt like another world now. For a few quiet moments, neither of them spoke. Then Emily noticed something on the wall behind him. A faded photograph. It showed a younger Daniel standing beside another man and a small girl. The girl looked about 8 years old, smiling brightly while sitting on a horse. Emily pointed gently. "Your family?" Daniel turned and looked at the photograph. For a long moment he did not answer. Finally he nodded once. "My daughter." Emily smiled softly. "She looks happy." Daniel's expression did not change. She was. The way he said it made Emily's chest tighten. "Was?" The giant cowboy stared into the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes as if old memories were burning there. Many years ago there was another storm like this one. Emily listened quietly. The valley was smaller back then. Fewer houses. Just ranchers trying to survive the winters. Daniel's voice was steady but heavy. One night, a storm came faster than anyone expected. My daughter was staying at the schoolhouse in town because the teacher kept the children late during bad weather. Emily felt a strange chill run through her. Daniel continued. I tried to reach the school before the storm got worse, but the road was gone. Snow covered everything. His hands tightened slightly. By the time I arrived, the storm had already trapped everyone inside. Emily leaned forward. Were they safe? Daniel did not answer immediately. The old schoolhouse roof collapsed under the weight of the snow. Emily gasped quietly. Daniel's voice grew quieter. Many people did not survive that night. The fire cracked loudly in the silence that followed. Emily slowly understood the sadness she had seen in his eyes earlier. Your daughter was there. Daniel nodded. She was 8 years old. Emily did not know what to say. The loss in his voice felt deeper than the storm outside. I am so sorry. Daniel gave a small nod, but did not respond. For years after that night, the valley blamed the storm. He said quietly, but I knew the truth. Emily looked at him carefully. What? Truth? Daniel leaned forward slightly. The teacher that night had ignored the weather warnings, kept the children late, thought the storm would pass. Emily's heart began beating faster. Daniel continued slowly. If the children had gone home earlier, they would have been safe. The words hung heavily in the warm air of the cabin. Emily swallowed. The new teacher in town now. That is you. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment she wondered if she should be afraid, but Daniel's eyes held no anger, only deep exhaustion. You must hate teachers, she whispered. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. He looked directly at her. That night taught me something important. Emily waited. Storms do not forgive mistakes, but people still deserve a chance to do better. The tension in Emily's chest slowly eased. Outside, the wind roared again, louder than before. Suddenly, a distant sound cut through the storm. A bell. Both of them froze. Emily looked toward the door. What was that? Daniel stood up instantly. The town alarm bell. His voice turned serious. Something is wrong. Emily stood as well. What do you mean? Daniel grabbed his coat and hat. When emergencies happen in the valley, the church bell rings so people know. Someone needs help. The bell rang again faintly through the storm. Emily's heart raced. In this weather? Daniel nodded grimly. That means it is serious. He moved toward the door. Emily stepped forward. You cannot go out there in this storm. Daniel looked back at her calmly. Someone might be trapped. The same way you were. Emily knew he was right. Without another word, the giant cowboy opened the door. The wind exploded inside the cabin. Snow blasted across the floor like frozen dust. Daniel stepped outside into the white chaos. Emily hesitated only a second before grabbing the lantern and following him. The cold hit her like a hammer. Daniel turned back. You should stay. Emily shook her head firmly. You saved my life. I am not letting you go alone. For the first time that night, Daniel almost smiled. Stay close. They pushed forward into the raging storm. The bell continued ringing somewhere in the distance. Step by step, they fought across the frozen valley. The snow was deeper now, reaching their knees in some places. The wind made every breath difficult. After what felt like forever, a dark shape appeared ahead. A wagon, half buried in snow. Daniel ran forward. Inside the wagon, a young boy was curled under a thin blanket, shivering violently. Emily rushed to him. He is freezing. Daniel lifted the boy easily into his arms. We need to get him back to the cabin now. The journey back felt even longer. The storm tried to push them down again and again, but Daniel kept moving. Finally, the cabin door appeared through the snow. They rushed inside and slammed it shut. Emily quickly wrapped the boy in blankets near the fire while Daniel prepared hot water. Slowly, color returned to the child's face. The boy looked up at them weakly. "Thank you." Emily smiled warmly. "You are safe now." The storm continued all night, but inside the small cabin, 3 lives were now connected by survival. As morning slowly arrived, the wind finally began to fade. Sunlight broke through the clouds, shining across the endless white valley. Emily stepped outside the cabin and looked at the peaceful, snow-covered land. Daniel joined her quietly. "Looks different when the storm ends," she said. He nodded. "Storms always end eventually." Emily looked at him thoughtfully. "You spent years saving people from storms like this, did you not?" Daniel shrugged. "If I can stop another family from losing someone the way I did, then it is worth it." Emily felt deep respect grow in her heart. Back in the town schoolhouse, many children would soon be waiting for their new teacher. She turned toward Daniel. "I think this valley needs people like you." Daniel looked across the snowy plains, "and it needs teachers who are brave enough to stay." Emily smiled. "Then I guess we will both be staying." The wind was quiet now, but the story of the giant cowboy and the young teacher who survived the worst storm in years would travel through the valley for a long time, and many people would remember that sometimes the strongest heroes are the quiet ones who walk into the storm to save strangers. Thank you for watching Hidden West Stories. If you enjoy powerful Western stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel Hidden West Stories and join us for more unforgettable tales from the wild frontier.